Hey everyone,
Hey there, folks.
this is AV,
This is Rita.
and you're listening to
I Don't Know Her.
the podcast where we talk about women
And some other folks.
that you've probably never heard of, but
And
you should
today,
have.
you will.
Sweet,
We almost got that.
almost got it. We're a little rusty
Yes.
again. I feel like this is the season that feels like we're just continuously doing over.
Yeah, you remember Lamb Chop and that song of "This is the song that will never end."
This is
That
the
is
song that never ends.
that is how the annoyance in my own heart feels. Of like every time we try to do this, there's something else that's just knocking us sideways.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's been knocking us sideways.
I am separating, and Evie got a new roommate.
Yeah.
Guess who has moved in? Yes, we live together now.
We
So-
do. So there was like a whole move situation that was happening. And in the middle of that,
Then they all got COVID. My family did.
yes.
And so had to quarantine, had to postpone the move, had to
Take
take
care
care
of
of two very sick people. My soon ex-partner, I don't even know what to call him. We'll just call him his name. Nick got really sick, and it's scary. So I just wanted to make sure like he was taken care of, make sure my son was taken care of. So that added on about another 10 days.
It did. And then by the time we would have been ready, that was when I had revision surgery.
Yes. And I moved in the day before they left for surgery.
So it's just been like, wow, a lot happening, a lot of COVID related shit.
Yeah.
Because as everybody knows, I think I know 2 people who have not gotten COVID at this point.
I know one personal person that I
Yeah.
know that hasn't gotten it.
And it's just wild. Like Omicron is like so fucking contagious.
Yeah.
So, it's just been like everybody's just been bing, bang, boom, knocked down. And that's also meant that you've had to work a lot more because there's
I've
no
had
one to work.
Coworkers who are symptomatic, so we send them home. Some have tested positive, then they got to quarantine.
Yep.
We're asking at least 7 to 10 days, and that means there's nobody to work. So I am fine. So I've been working a crap ton.
Yeah,
So
like doubles and
Oh yeah,
extra time, and it's just been a lot.
it's a hard time right now. So yeah,
So we appreciate you sticking with us and not berating us on the internet.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Because we kind of deserve it at this point. Like, we feel bad. We really do feel quite guilty. And it's just been one of those times. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that a lot of you are having similar issues in your life. And so you understand. And we appreciate your grace that you're giving us because
Absolutely.
we really could use it at this point in time. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah. AV surgery went very well.
Yes.
Recovering nicely.
Yes, other than the fact that apparently I'm allergic to every adhesive that has ever been created. It's a new phenomenon. So
Yes.
I had a rash all over my torso, but now we've taken care of that. So
Yeah. So I feel like maybe I can trust this.
I don't want to jinx it.
Don't touch anything. We're going to walk in quietly. We ain't going to touch nothing.
I made that joke about Omicron being the Kool-Aid man, and then it did it to us.
It just comes through and goes, Omicron.
And it just really busted our shit up. So we
Dead.
Yeah, we're here. And in fact, just as we were about to start recording, one of our pieces of equipment fell
Broke?
apart, and then another one broke, and it was like, wow, today is still trying to work against us.
Yes,
So
we're going to do this.
if our levels are off, thank you to Lucas for fixing that, because we cannot really actually hear where our levels are at because our headphones are not working.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love you all. Thank you for listening. One thing I did want to tell you about is that we have, because of how many scheduling issues that we've had and like Rita working all the time and at the same time trying to pack up her stuff and things like that, we also had fallen down on the job on our bonus episodes.
Yes.
So if you're a Patreon subscriber and you have not jumped ship, oh my God, you're an angel.
Thank you.
You're a saint, and we really appreciate you. With that said, we have been mulling over, like, how do we want our bonus episodes to look. What do we want to do for those? And we've reached out to our listeners a few times and we've just gotten crickets. So I actually was like, I'm friends with a couple of our listeners, like, because they're listeners, they eventually like found me on social media and we've had conversations and now we're friends online. And I've really realized that a lot of the people who listen to our show are super involved in their communities in certain ways. Like, and I think they're fascinating people and they're doing things that I think we should talk about and hear about.
And we don't know them.
Yeah.
So it would be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know y'all very well. So we want to introduce ourselves to you and you to us and talk about the cool things you're doing in your community. So we already have a couple of people lined up, including one listener who lives in the Flathead Valley in Montana, which is a very wealthy, beautiful area that is also a tribal area. And there have been a lot of clashes between a lot of these newcomers who are moving in with a ton of money and working remotely, have giant salaries, can buy $1 million homes or multi-million-dollar homes, and they're pushing out working class and working poor people. So I am going to have her on to talk about that. And we've come up with a list of other listeners we know of who are doing incredibly cool things, including a sex shop manager, a queer-friendly sex shop manager, and a friend who was raised as like a polygamous Mormon Jewish person, which sounds
fascinating.
Kind of bananas, right? So we're going to approach a few of those people and see how many we can get to do that. But if you're a listener right now and you're like, hey, I have something cool to talk about.
Absolutely.
Please reach out to us. We would love to interview you and have you tell us about the cool thing you're working on. And so that's what we're going to be doing. I hope you look forward to those bonus episodes. And they will be behind a paywall, unfortunately, because that is the whole point of bonus material. So if you are like, hey, I would love for my friends and community to hear this, tell them just like the $3 and then they can hear it.
$3.
And some of them, if we're like, oh man, this needs to go out and everybody needs to hear it, then we'll put it out as public material. But for the most part, our bonus episodes will stay behind our Patreon paywall. So please become a subscriber.
That would be awesome. And also, yes, thank you so much for sticking with us, especially through this hard time in both of our lives. It's been a doozy.
It really has. And I think everybody's kind of going through it. Like, I think COVID has disrupted so many of our norms, and in some ways good. Like, we are doing things differently in ways that I think are good and being more self-reflective and stuff like that. But then there's this where it just feels like you can't get your footing and everything underneath you is slippery. And
what's one more thing that could happen?
Yeah. Like shit.
But we're going to keep going.
We are.
Yes.
So Rita is up this week.
Yes, I am. You ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Have you heard of Helen Duncan?
No.
Scotland's last witch.
Ha! Totally didn't expect that.
I told you this one was going to be a little bonkers.
A little bonkers, yeah. It sounds like it.
So before we get started, like I wrote in here, I wanted to ask you, in IMO, what is a witch to you?
Well, for me, it's someone who identifies as a witch and practices in some way or form the ancient pagan rituals of, we call it Wiccan, but it's actually Weechin. That's the correct pronunciation.
Really? That's how you pronounce it. I didn't know that.
I used to be a medieval studies person, and my professor would like beat us over the head with that. It is not Wiccan. It is Weechin.
Weechin.
Yeah.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah. So, that is like, that's been my interpretation of it is,
and I think we've seen like the stereotypical, pointed hat and evil and yeah.
Wicked
and, up to no good, alluring type of person who just lures people for bad, all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are like the stereotypes, but the actual, like, for me, the definition would be someone who practices Weechin stuff.
Alrighty. Well, even though Helen's was described as Scotland's last witch, Helen described herself as more of a medium.
Oh, okay.
Someone who could summon and channel and speak with spirits. Now, before we get into her story, the research that I went through has very different sides. One of them is she is a phony. Yeah, she was somebody just looking to gain stuff for herself. The other side is they absolutely 100% believe that she was a legit medium. So I'm just going to lay the groundwork here. So at the very end, we can see what side are you going to be on?
Okay, so we have very opposing
sides.
Yes.
Her full name was Victoria Helen MacFarlane. She was Scottish. It's a very Scottish name, by the way.
It is very Scottish.
And she was born November 25th, 1897 in Perthshire, Scotland. Her parents were Isabella and Archibald, and Helen was fourth out of 8 children. Her father's occupation was a master slater. I don't know what that is. Like someone who lays slate?
I guess.
You could be a master at that? Can't you just lay it down? I don't know.
I think that's like, because in like the medieval times all the way up even till now, like what we call unions now, they used to be guilds.
Oh.
And so just like, you have apprentices.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my interpretation of what that is, because the UK, England, Scotland, Ireland.
Okay, there's like a little bit of a
the guilds were really important. They were working class, what we would call blue collar people who were unionized and stuff like that.
Interesting. Well, her family was very severely devout Presbyterians, like intense.
What does that even mean?
Super strict, like if you're going to step out of line, you're going to get beat, kind of thing.
Oh, So they're like that, like
beat
really,
you over the head with
really rigid puritanical Christianity.
Yes.
Okay, I get it.
Helen began displaying her gifts at a very young age, and I use parentheses when I say gifts. Y'all couldn't see it, but I did it.
You mean quotation marks?
Oh, what did I say?
Parentheses?
Oh, God. I don't know anything, do I?
You literally made quotation marks and then said parentheses.
Okay. I just told Avi the story of it's a cutter because one of my coworkers had cut a hole in a piece of wood and I couldn't remember the name for
a saw.
Yes. And so I said, it's a cutter.
I would have loved you more if you'd said it was a cutter outer.
It's a cutter outer. Okay. Quotation marks.
Gifts. Quotation
gifts.
Quote unquote gifts.
Yes, because people with supernatural powers were usually just like burned at the stake at this time. So like her calling it a gift, even though it kind of got her in trouble, like maybe she felt like it was a gift.
You know what I've always found an interesting paradox is that idea that a lot of those puritanical Christian sects were like, they're evil, burn them at the stake. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, we're denying that those things existed. Like, you can't have it both ways.
How can you believe that that's not real, but also there's a punishment for it?
Yeah. It's and also obviously deeply, deeply rooted in misogyny.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. She began to tell children's fortunes on the playground at school. That's kind of where she started, which sounds like something you would do.
I absolutely immediately thought, that's me.
I see a very terrible future for you. I'm losing it. You need to give me another $1.
Exactly. Like when I had the fucking bunny bees.
Oh, God.
In the ceiling. People gave me money for that in the form of Luden's cough drops.
Still have to find you a t-shirt that has Luden's cough drops on the front.
Surely. Maybe we make that as like a bonus merch item.
It's got I don't know her on it instead of Luden's.
Instead of Luden's.
So she started making a name for herself on the playground because everyone's like, oh, you can go to Helen and she'll tell your future. She must have turned into something important to people because she started to not only read fortunes for her classmates, she started reading for her teachers. Yes.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I'm like...
highly inappropriate.
The teacher's like, what are you doing?
I know. I literally put in here, highly inappropriate.
Real weird.
Crosses a line, yes. Even though people were fascinated and drawn to her, her mother was getting really worried. She's afraid that Helen was not only going to get herself in big trouble, but get the family in trouble. Like, she's just worried, like, oh God, they're going to start talking, or they're going to call her crazy, or...
Well, and even like you talked about them being such strict Presbyterians, I imagine she also felt like...
the church is going to get pissed off.
Well, and personally affronted by it. You know, it's like people who are really super Christian and then they have gay children and they disown them.
Yeah, start shunning people.
Because they're like, that's evil in my eyes.
Helen was talked about in good ways and in bad. She didn't care. As she got older, she said that she felt like her gifts got stronger. And despite what her family thought, she began to hold seances at her home.
Seances? I did that as a child.
You did?
I did in like middle school and early high school. You better believe I did.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was the...
Did you
remember
reach
the
anybody?
craft?
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was our whole lifestyle.
I mean, we did a Ouija board one time with two of my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to summon something.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She got married in 1916 to a man named Henry Duncan. He was a war veteran and a cabinet maker. He 100% supported Helen and her supernatural gifts. He didn't mind. He actually encouraged her.
Well, I wonder, did she make money off of it?
We'll just wait and see.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind if my spouse was doing something like that if they were making money.
She started to dive deeply into practicing spiritualism and would invite people to sit with her as she summoned and spoke to the dead. For those of you on the other side of the microphone who don't know what spiritualism is, it's been around forever, but it gained most of its traction around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And people would gather and practice talking to spirits, like levitation, telepathy, hypnotism. There were so many people that were into this that in 1893, the National Spiritualist Association was formed.
1893?
Mm-hmm. A lot of people were into it.
That feels very appropriate. There's this great podcast that I know some of you probably already listened to, but if you don't, I highly recommend, called You're Wrong About. And they had an episode that was specifically about, actually, maybe it was on Maintenance Phase. One of the two. It was about like the quack doctors, like the kind of like, what do we call it?
Like snake
oil, right?
Salesman, yeah.
So they did an episode debunking snake oil stuff, and like snake oil was actually real.
Really?
So when we use that, we're using it incorrectly.
Oh, jeez. Of course we are.
But like they talked about like there was such a mistrust of doctors at the time that then that opened up the door to a lot of naturopath stuff and spiritualism and like so on and so forth.
Yeah, the spiritualism movement, and it was very fascinating for people because it was like another side to this world. And that's what they were trying to do. So with all the fascination surrounding mediums, gypsies, magicians, and fortune tellers, like we were just talking about, a lot of folks tried to start making a dime, and they would like hustle and swindle easy targets. The demand for like ghostly experiences were like booming.
Especially among wealthy. They love that shit. Oh, yeah.
And for like people faking it, it was like a stage production. There was lights and flashes and someone behind a curtain that was banging and moaning and like shaking a piece of metal, you know, a string pulling a chair across the room, you know, kind of stuff. It was easy. It was entertaining. And yes, especially for people with money. Some people called Helen out as one of these swindlers. Here's where it gets a little tricky. So if Helen was really an authentic medium, the theory is that she was doing real work and real readings, but she couldn't keep up with these other folks that were offering an experience. So she needed to compete in the market. So maybe she went into going into more of the theatrics that weren't real.
She just embellished.
Yes. She put some sugar. She put some sugar on it. So she decided to up her game and provide visual excitement that was bringing people out in droves. She would dress up for her seances. She started wearing like this big, poofy, like black kind of silky like suit. It was like all fluffy and poofy, and it was like a pantsuit almost.
Like Missy Elliott?
Kind of. Yeah, it was big and poofy, and she was a little bit of a bigger woman too.
Like Missy Elliott and Supa Dupa Fly?
Yes. It was like a robe type of outfit. She started introducing what she called spirit guides. One of them was a little girl named Peggy, and one of them was named Albert, which she started calling Uncle Al. So people would want to come and see Peggy. They would want to come and see Uncle Al.
This is so good. I used to read, like, obsessively consume like stories about stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like nonfiction books.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I would read about people like this and their spirit guides and stuff like that. This is all like territory I once tread in my youth.
Good, I'm glad. So Albert was British, and once she introduced him, Albert would sometimes address the people in the room with a physical voice. There is actually recorded audio of Helen and Albert speaking. I'm going to have you take a listen.
Okay.
It's old, so it's a little difficult to make out everything they say. Take a listen.
Next person to come here, I want someone your side, girl, but further back towards the corner there, to ask a young lady out that passed to our side of life. Now, I have a feeling that she's had an operation of some kind. Will you try her on? No, she doesn't move on your way.
No. Yeah, I know a young lady. Yes. Do you know her name? Young lady, it's the name of Kathleen.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Will you call her out?
Interesting.
So at the beginning of the audio, the big booming British voice is who she called Uncle Al.
Okay.
A little bit of the lighter, the female's voice who was saying, yes, yes, that's Helen.
Mm-hmm. And then there's someone else, right? Like
there's people in the room.
a client or whatever.
Yeah. What did you think?
Well, it was really hard to understand.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it just sounded like she was doing a voice.
Like throwing her voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can obviously hear Albert talking very loudly. This, like, investigation into this audio suggests that Helen was just throwing her voice. She was doing one, and then she was talking lighter on the other.
I mean, it would be like if right now I was just, like, suddenly burst into
an accent.
Like a southern accent. And I was like, that's my cousin. Well, okay, but it's just you.
Well, even with introducing these spiritual guides, her readings were spot on, which was interesting. And her conversation with the spirits pulled intimate details and facts that she possibly couldn't know about her clients, which amazed most of her audience. She also added visual theatrics, which were... This is where I was like, oh, no.
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 She claimed to have spirits that could materialize. And in 1928, a photographer named Harvey Metcalf sat into one of her seances and he snuck a camera in.
You said it was 1898?
1928.
1928.
He snuck a camera in and he took photos of these alleged materialized spirits. It is so bad. And I'm going to show you pictures of this. And I'm going to have you describe what you see in these photos.
Okay.
And that's Helen.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Okay.
Girl.
Okay.
Helen, what you doing?
I don't know exactly what this is supposedly made out of, but it just very much looks like they like took like an IV, stand, that you can roll around, and then they just covered it in a sheet with a mask. That's what it looks like.
Like a puppet? It looks like a puppet.
Yeah. And like, what is happening to her face though? Like, it looks
we'll get
like
to that.
It looks like there's like like it's reaching out to touch her face, but also like she's blowing it up, like a balloon. It's very weird. And then there's somebody people holding her wrists. So the way that the photograph is composed is that like there's like a curtain, and she's sitting in a chair like behind the curtain, but the curtain is pulled back by the person who's holding one of her wrists. And then there's another person holding her other wrist, and then it's like behind her left shoulder is this quote unquote apparition that just looks
looks like a pretty sad ass paper mache.
Yeah, paper mache puppet. It's
terrible.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
Oh, Helen. So yes, these are god-awful. She would have pieces of clothing that were stuffed, like flying around the room, masks that would float, sheets made to look like bodies. Harvey, who snuck the camera in, took all those photos and debunked Helen's ghost big time.
Okay, so he was doing that not to be like a supporter, but to be a debunker.
He wanted to debunk her. She would also do this thing where she said, and this is where this gets wild. This is where it gets wild. She would release what's called ectoplasm.
Oh my God, like from Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm. Ectoplasm is defined as a supernatural viscous substance that is supposed to exude from the body of a medium during a spiritualistic trance and form the material for the manifestations of spirits.
Sure.
So like Ghostbusters.
Yes. Sure.
Helen would have her ectoplasm pulled from her mouth.
Oh, that's what was happening?
Mm-hmm, pulled from her mouth, her nose, and her ears, which would eventually, it would move and drape around her in the front of her. And this is what she would claim was the materialization of a ghost. It was long, like a gauzy sheet of material, and it just kept coming out of her mouth.
So she would like swallow it?
We'll get there.
Oh my God.
She said
I'm really
that
grossed out.
She said also you could never shine a light on the ectoplasm because it would be harmful. So you couldn't like
look at it?
Quite all the way see it.
Okay, cool. That sounds correct.
Yes. Accounts from people who were there said it was wispy like a living cobweb and that it glowed bright white. But yes, you saw a little bit of the scene of the ectoplasm, but I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's fully out of her mouth.
The fuck am I looking at?
That is the ectoplasm draped around her. What does that look like?
It looks like satin or something. That but it's like clear, like cheesecloth. That's what it reminds me of. Is it cheesecloth? It's cheesecloth.
It ends up being cheesecloth.
However, I want to just say that this is like 8 feet of cheesecloth
that she did pull out of her mouth.
So I just want to get this clear. She fucking ate this and then like left a tail of it in her throat and then pulled it out.
Probably.
How do you fucking not gag?
I don't know.
I'm like gagging at the thought of it.
She would pull it out of her nose too, and like her.
Ugh.
Yeah, and they said like during.
I cannot. We can't.
They said like during her seances she got a lot of nosebleeds.
No shit.
Yeah, because she's probably jamming shit up there.
Yeah, she absolutely is. Yeah. She's lucky she didn't like fucking cause brain damage. She was probably pushing crochet needles up there. Knitting needles to push that stuff up her face. Gross.
Yeah, so I'm still at this point, as I'm doing this research, and it's getting weirder and weirder. I was like, is she still, like, is she faking these theatrics, but actually a real medium who feels like she has to do this to be able to make more money?
Yeah.
Yeah, she went as far, too, as, like, to be strip searched before her readings. Like, she would have people examine her.
Yeah.
And then they would be like, yeah, she doesn't have anything hidden. So, yeah, that's why she was swallowing that.
Yeah, well, of course. Like, here's what I can't. Like, how did she talk?
I don't know.
How did she even hold on, like, a conversation with this, like, gauze, this cheesecloth in her fucking throat? Ugh. So, I'm really grossed out.
Also, fun fact about Helen, one of her ectoplasms was kept and is still at Cambridge. It was tested and yes. In fact, it was cheesecloth.
And I bet it has like stomach acid on. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm so sorry, everyone. This is so gross.
And then she did have another one of her ectoplasms that came back after they tested it. It was a mix of toilet paper and egg whites. So she was swallowing that and then pulling that back up.
Yeah, because the egg whites are the slime. Like, it's to keep it like, first, to keep it lubed up.
To be able to push it back out.
Yeah, and then 2... ectoplasm.
Yes.
Right? Gross. I'm so grossed out. Everybody, we should have had a trigger warning for this.
Oh, sorry. So desperate.
I'm gonna add it at the end, and then Lucas is gonna have to put it in because like this is definitely triggering.
Little gaggy. So desperate to try to save face, she was paid £50 to do a round of tests in 1931 by a famous debunker named Harry Price. Debunkers were like basically like the Mythbusters of their day.
Yeah.
in the spiritualism world. Since so many people were being swindled and duped, it became an out-and-out mission to find and expose the people who were phonies, just like you were saying with the medical field. Even Harry Houdini was part of this, hiring people to debunk fake mediums, because he just didn't think that like the people who were out there faking it were ruining the people who were doing like real magic and real mediums. Yeah.
Sorry, sir.
I know.
You're just sleight of hands and like magic eye tricks. Like,
Oh, he was mad because people were onto his game, and he's like, "Hey,
Yeah.
hey.
hey, look at that person over there, though.
Her testing went fine until she's sitting in the room, and Harry leaves, and he comes back. He comes back with an X-ray machine, and he says, "I want to X-ray your body." And she
Oh,
loses her shit.
yep. That seems correct.
She starts flailing. She's tearing at her clothes. She's yelping. She slaps Harry Price across the face. She runs out of the room, and she's in hysterics. She runs out into the road, and she's like having an episode. Her husband runs after her. He's trying to calm her down, and she's screaming and she's yelling, and people are just like backing away. And then all of a sudden she's fine. And she walks back into the room, and then she says, "You can X-ray me." And Harry was like, "No." He's like, "I know you probably pulled it out of your mouth and gave it to your husband while you were hysterical out in the street.
Yeah.
And nobody could see you."
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, "Well, you didn't prove anything because you didn't take the X-ray, and I'm ready to be X-rayed." Yeah.
Yeah, this is all suspect.
Despite all of the debunking, she continues to perform her seances. In 1931, she's actually denounced as a fraud by the London Spiritual Alliance. She
Interesting.
seemed to get even more popular, though, because people enjoyed like her like show.
The show,
The
yeah.
show.
Mm-hmm. I mean, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's like when you go to like a murder mystery theater.
Yeah, it's a thrill.
Yeah, like you're sitting next to who you didn't realize was a fucking actor.
Yeah.
They like seem like a normal person. You're having like dinner with them, and then suddenly they're like disappear and they're dead under the tablecloth, and you're like, oh my god!
During World War II, obviously a lot of people were losing loved ones, and more people were reaching out to mediums to try to speak to those that they had lost.
Yeah.
Which is really shitty for people taking advantage
Yes.
of people who lost
Yes.
family members. In 1941, Helen held a seance in Portsmouth. In this particular gathering, she channeled the spirit of a sailor who was part of a British ship called the HMS Barnum. When she asked how he died, he told her his ship had been sunk. News of the ship being sunk, though, had not been revealed yet publicly.
Oh.
It was being withheld to not tip off the Germans that the ship was downed.
Oh.
So the Navy got wind that she knew this information, and they took a really close look at her because they were like,
How did you know this?
"How do you know this, and are you a spy?"
Yeah. Absolutely.
So she got a look like the government was looking at her.
Yeah, like it would be like the CIA and the FBI are on your shit.
Yeah, how do you know that this building was blown up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or this person was murdered?
Yeah.
The more readings she did, the more bad attention she started gaining. People claiming that she was a fraud began to report her, and it even like ended up her getting arrested a couple times.
I'm not surprised. Like, because it's fraud.
Yes.
Like, if you're taking people's money and you're purporting to be one thing and it's really just
Something else.
theater, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with theater if everybody who's there knows it's theater.
Yeah. She was arrested at one of her seances in 1944, and as she was held, the prosecutors researched a century-old act that they could use to try to prosecute
Oh,
her.
no.
This was called the Witchcraft Act of 1735.
No!
Do you know? Are you familiar with this?
No,
one?
I'm just already fucking pissed off.
Yes.
It's like, you could just charge her with fraud.
Yes.
Like, it's not a big fucking deal. Like, just make her pay a fine.
But this is 1735 when this act was made.
I know, which is exactly right. It's like you're reaching so far back because you want to punish her.
Exactly.
Because you're misogynists.
So this act was used to criminalize people who claimed to have magical powers. The act originally was designed to stop the execution of hundreds of people who were being falsely accused of being witches. So with this act,
Interesting.
it was like in the 16th and 17th century. It allowed a person to be tried, needed to be tried by a jury, not by an angry mob. And then they would get like a sentence instead of being hung.
Burned at the stake, yeah.
So the act also criminalized fraudulent spiritual activity. Helen went through a 7-day trial, where people came to testify for her and against her. More than 30 people came to testify in her defense, and others who could not come to the trial wrote letters and sent them in. Helen wanted to perform a seance in court. Yes.
Which would have been wild.
That she was not lying or faking. But the judge refused.
Yeah,
he was like, we are not doing
20th
this.
century having a seance in a courtroom. Wild. Bananas. Wish it would have happened.
He said no. She was convicted under the Witchcraft Act of 1735 and sentenced to 9 months in jail. When she was convicted, she stood up and she shouted out, "I have done nothing wrong. Is there a God?" And then they arrested her and took her. Her arrest made public headlines because obviously it's quite a sensational story.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill heard of the trial and he remarked that it was absolute tomfoolery and a waste of the country's resources.
To prosecute her?
Yes.
Oh.
He thought the whole thing was absurd.
Yeah.
Putting her on trial.
I agree. Like I said,
7-day
it should just
trial.
be a fucking fine.
After serving her complete sentence, she was released in 1945. She went right back to holding seances, and she was arrested again in 1956. No jail time this time. She was ordered a fine. So this makes Helen the last person to be sentenced to jail by this act. One more woman was tried under it, but she had to pay a fine. But Helen was the last one that actually did jail time.
Yeah.
Eventually, the Witchcraft Act was repealed and replaced with the Fraudulent Mediums Act. A member of Parliament thought it needed an update.
I mean, just still, like, the fact that that's even a fucking law, that is fucking weird. The Fraudulent Mediums Act? Oh. I love this shit.
Yes.
This is very funny to me. This is like a comedy routine.
So shortly after her last arrest, she died in her home in Edinburgh from natural causes. Apparently, she was a very unhealthy person. She has really bad health, really bad heart. I think maybe from the things that she did to her body.
I mean, she
probably.
fucking kept eating cheesecloth and then pulling it out of her esophagus. Like, that is not healthy.
Yes. To this day, people still debate whether or not Helen was a real medium or a fraud, or perhaps a little bit of both. There's an official website run by her granddaughter, Margaret Hahn, which Margaret still holds a petition that people can sign to this day to eradicate what she felt was a wrongful conviction of her grandmother. I took a look at that website and she had a lot of information about their family and about what Helen did. Her granddaughter really still believes that her grandmother was legit.
So tell me some, like, we didn't really get to hear, besides the, like, knowing that the ship had sunk before it had been released to the public, what are some other things that she got right? Did you come across any specific examples?
I did. There was some where she did readings where she was speaking in numerous languages that she didn't, like, nobody knew that she knew. Like, she was speaking in German and, like, other languages.
That she didn't have any training in.
No. And she was doing readings from family members of people who had died, those people speaking in that language, and then her speaking that language back. And so that would really, like, shock people that she was able to speak a different language, also had new history, family history, new things that she couldn't possibly know from the people who were getting the readings done. And those are like the letters that were written in all 30 people that showed up for her trial. They were like, she got this right. She got this, like, she saw that this was going to happen and it did happen. Like, there was so many letters in the court documents, just pages of letters of people and their experiences of what they felt were true readings. Yeah. And it's mostly people who believe in her still. It's because of those experiences.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense. Like, if you were like, listen, some of this shit was not legit, obviously. But she knew this, and this, and this. Like, that feels real. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest one for her story was that ship, because it was when the government started looking at her.
Yeah.
And a lot of people felt like they pushed her to be prosecuted more because the war was starting to get really intense. And so they were thinking, like, could she possibly release any more information? Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, the paranoia was real.
Was real. Yeah. And so maybe just put her away and she won't be a problem anymore.
I think there was a twofold really bonus benefit, right? Like, so there's this, like, idea that, just FYI, we're going to crack down on you even if the way that you're presenting your information is via, quackery. But also, what a great distraction for people away from the war
Yeah.
is to get really invested in this, like, clearly sensational crime story.
Absolutely.
I mean, what a great distraction.
Yeah.
from
And
the
there's
war.
so many, there's like a lot of spiritualist YouTubes of people that really believe in her. Yeah. And then there's a lot of other people that are like, meh. Yeah.
What are your vibes on her?
I feel that she did have something. And I think she pushed herself to go to a place that was a little bit cheap because she wanted to stay relevant and still do her readings and make money.
Do you believe in mediums in general?
Yes.
You said
Do
that
you?
was such... No, I'm not sure if I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Why for you? What would make you feel that way?
Because I've had some people who have done it in front of me, and there was truth to it, which was really weird. So I have a friend whose father died of cancer, and this lady was doing a reading for her, and she was doing something, and she goes, oh, your father. And she touched her, and she says, don't worry, you still have enough time to tell him what you need to tell him. And my friend was like, what? And he was diagnosed like the next year and died in like 3 months.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually an article I shared that was right after my dad died. So to remind our listeners, my mom died 5 days after I had surgery, the first surgery, and then my dad died 7 weeks to the day after that. So it's been a rough time. And I had come across this article that was a few years old. It was this piece that was written by a writer who had a similar experience, went to a medium, kind of just like for shits and giggles and specifically kind of to debunk it.
Mm-hmm.
And the person like said something that like was his dad. And, you know, to this day, he's like, I don't really know, but like, it was just, there was something really comforting in the idea that like, we still had connection to him.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, I think that's what people are searching for when they go to mediums
Yes.
and they're talking to, you know, psychics and things like that. They're seeking some kind of reassurance that they're, one, on the right path, and two, people still care about them, and that that connection is still there.
Mm-hmm. And
And I think that like, if that's what you're going for and that's what you're getting out of it, then that's great.
yeah.
And as we've discussed before, I think we still don't really truly understand how space and time work.
Yes.
The science isn't there yet. We just really don't. I mean, when people talk about having deja vu, like, I really do think that people have, like, I've had, and they're innocuous. They're just like a conversation, and it's like, hey, could you pass the salt? Yeah. Do you want this one or that one? Right? Like, just really fucking mundane shit where I'm like, I have done this before. And that's because I think we just don't understand time and space to
I just feel
its
like
full extent.
There's so much room for more out there.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't possibly have all the answers. And I do feel like some people have certain gifts where they can do this.
Yeah.
Can I? Probably not.
Yeah. I think most people are just really good therapists.
Oh, really quick for my information. There is a gentleman on YouTube called The History Guy. He did a whole series mainly on the ship that Helen
Foretold.
foretold that it had sunk. Also, HelenDuncan.org is the website run by her granddaughter. The BBC.org did a really fascinating little, like, 45-minute documentary about her. I got some from Wikipedia for Timeline, and then there's a really good book by Laura Brown. It's called The A to Z of Great Scots, and Helen is one of the chapters.
I love that name.
Right?
That's
and
great.
that is it.
What a cool, fun way to come back into our routine.
I'm really glad I didn't give up on it. I was telling AV that halfway through it, I was like, this is weird. This is crazy. Once she started pulling stuff out of her face, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But I stuck with it.
I'm really glad you did, because that was very entertaining. And I think also really great material for all of us to like reflect on. What do we believe and where are our limits of belief, and what do we think about the unknown?
The other side.
Yeah, the unknown.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it, folks.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you to Lucas McIntyre, our editor.
And don't forget, you can find us on patreon.com/IDKHerPodcast. You can also email us at idon'tknowherpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, although we don't really fucking tweet, and Instagram, and we're pretty bad at Instagram right now too. We're also on Facebook. We're never on Facebook. But you can follow us in all of those places.
Here.
We do read our messages. We do read our emails. We do respond to them. So again, if you think you want to be part of our bonus episode series where you're doing something cool, or somebody you know is doing something cool in your community that you would like to highlight, please reach out to us. We definitely want to interview you.
Alrighty, folks.
Wait, we got to thank
Jennifer Finch
of L7 for
our
kick-ass
theme
music. Yeah,
there we go. See, we're rusty, but we can still do it.
it's true. And if you want to buy any merch for us, we still have stuff up at TeePublic.
Alrighty, folks. Till next time.
Goodbye.